The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, the asparagus showdown we are gearing up for.
That's not what the NEPM Asparagus Festival was actually about. We're using asparagus to bring us together across the river despite our differences for the love of the spear.
Says you. We'll hear from the Hadley side of the asparagus divide when we hang out with Wally Czajkowski of Plainville Farm.
And we'll open not just our ports but our perspectives of chamber music when we talk about MIFA's Victory Player's latest program, Puerto Abierto, with music director Tian Yang. But first, a plethora of political happenings.
Time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Congressman Jim McGovern. McGoverning with McGovern. I'm going to have to pull back the veil a little bit for radio listeners right now. Because of your congressional schedule being so busy, we have to tape this conversation in advance of when our show airs in the afternoon. So, given the fact that 12 New York City jurors met for 5 hours yesterday and did not come up with a verdict in the 34 felony counts about falsifying business records that Donald Trump has been accused of, there could be a verdict that comes in any time today. We might even get bumped off the air if the verdict comes in while the show is on the air.
Wouldn't that be a tragedy?
Wouldn't it? But we'll make a podcast for today anyway, so... It wouldn't be the first time that Trump has bumped us off the air. If the jury finds that Donald Trump is guilty of these counts, pretend that you're reacting to that.
Well, I'm not surprised if that were the verdict. But let's put this in perspective. He's being tried for paying hush money to a porn star to basically prevent a story from coming out that he thinks would have adversely impacted the 2016 election. That's a minor charge considered to the other stuff he's been charged with, which is a conspiracy to overturn the election, he's been charged with stealing classified information. Those are to me, even more serious. But look, I don't think this guy's fit to be president, regardless of what the outcome of the trial is. And it's just really disheartening to me that there are people out there and people that I serve with in Congress who I believe are reasonable people who are afraid to say what they really believe when it comes to him. I mean, they are so obsessed with pleasing the cult that they basically give him a pass on anything. I think it should be a reminder to all of us who are concerned that we have a lot of work to do between now and the election.
Okay, now pretend that the jury finds Donald Trump not guilty of these 34 counts of falsifying business records. What's your reaction?
Well, I mean, he's got 2 more trials to come. I mean, one on his stealing of classified information and the other on conspiracy to overturn an election. Those are very, very serious as well. He's doing all he can to delay them. But this election shouldn't be decided on the results of what happens in New York City. I mean, Donald Trump, I think, is a clear and present danger, to our democracy, period. He doesn't care about the Constitution. He thinks he's above the law. He thinks January 6th was all wonderful, wants to pardon everybody who tried to overturn the election on that day. He's a dangerous man. And I was a history major in college. I'm going back and dusting off some of my old history books to read about what was happening in Europe prior to the rise of Hitler. And I will tell anybody, go to the library and do a refresher course on what was happening in Europe in the 20s and the 30s, and it's eerily similar to what is happening here. And the discussions amongst the so-called know-it-alls was, he can't possibly be as bad as he's pretending to be. And then we know what happened in Europe. I just don't want that to happen here. I don't want this presidential election to be our last presidential election.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, in front of your office again this past Tuesday, Congressman, in Northampton. This from the Daily Hampshire Gazette. Protesters, angered by Israel's most recent deadly attack in Gaza, brought a metal trash can and an American flag to the sidewalk outside your offices and set it on fire. Were you in Northampton at the time of the flag burning in front of your office in protest of what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing, I think specifically now with the action in Rafah?
No, I wasn't in Northampton at the time. I read about what happened, and I'm equally disturbed by the strategy of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I was one of 2 members of the Massachusetts delegation to vote no on the Israeli military aid package. I continue to press Biden to do more to get an immediate ceasefire and to get humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza and to get the hostages released, because Hamas's taking of those hostages is a war crime. I don't know how many of them are alive. We need then to figure out a long-term strategy, not only to rebuild Gaza, but how Israel and the Palestinians can look to a future that is peaceful. But the longer this goes on, the more difficult it is going to be to find a resolution to this. I would just also say that for those who feel passionately about this, we need to figure out ways to persuade people. And I respect everybody's right to protest, but I'm not sure burning an American flag in front of my office is a way to get people to better understand what is happening in the Middle East. How do we encourage more dissent in this country in a way that is getting people who are on the sidelines to get involved and to start lobbying their representatives about taking bolder steps to try to bring this to an end? We have to engage in more thoughtful discussion about what we can do and what might work and what the future might be. And so I would encourage people to try to move their energies in those directions. That would be more persuasive and help build this movement up even more.
It does seem like there's this continued sense of urgency, especially in light of, Sunday's, what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called a tragic accident when there was a refugee camp that was hit by an Israeli airstrike that killed dozens of Palestinians trying to escape this war. So the level of frustration that's building here stateside seems understandable at the very least.
No, I understand the frustration. I share the frustration. And to simply dismiss what happened as a mistake ignores the fact that 35,000 people have already been killed. So, to dismiss it as a mistake is wrong. If people want our government to do more and to be more forceful here, then we need to start focusing on things that will help persuade people and to get more of our fellow citizens involved in this discussion who up to this point have been on the sidelines. That's all I'm suggesting here. If the United States is going to be part of the solution here, which I think it is essential, then we have to help articulate what that looks like, what that means. What are we asking for? And again, I think the most important thing that people should be asking for right now is an immediate ceasefire to get humanitarian aid into the people in Gaza. And hopefully that sets the stage to release the hostages. That's what everybody should be saying, and that's what the message should be. And again, I've said to the president and to the vice president and to the secretary of state that we have laws on our books. We have laws on our books that say that we need to freeze aid to countries that frustrate the delivery of humanitarian aid to people who are in need. I think that Israel is in violation of that law right now. We need to talk about the Leahy law. There are certainly units within the IDF that have violated Leahy law. We should make sure that they do not receive any U.S. aid. And we're told that what happened the other day, that the weapons that were used were from the United States. So this is a very, very serious situation. I don't question people's sincerity. I'm just simply saying we need to figure out what is the most effective tactics we can utilize to change the position of the White House.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, coffee with the congressman happened yesterday at the Bangs Community Center in Amherst. Right. How did that go? What were the constituents in the Amherst area interested in asking you about?
No, I thought it went well. I mean, I thought it was I enjoyed it. I don't know if they did, but I did. A lot of questions were on the Middle East. There were some students from UMass Amherst there who were still very concerned about the chancellor's decision to, have people arrested who were on campus, and people wanted to know what can they do. We had questions about Tibet. We had questions about infrastructure, about education, about the threat to women's reproductive freedoms. I mean, you name it. I mean, a whole bunch of conversations, concerns about local budgets in places like Amherst and the need to get more federal and state money to help communities like Amherst be able to meet all of its obligations. So I thought it was a very, very good conversation, and I really appreciate those who showed up.
Last week, Congressman, we spoke about Cuba and your request at the behest of many protesters in our area, including Pocky Wieland, who seems to come up every week in this conversation, to take Cuba off the list of states.
I love her.
Me too. The list of state-sponsored terrorism, and that has not happened yet. But the Biden administration has amended and clarified a number of existing sanctions against Cuba this week. Do you think that the president is changing his mind on the stance of Cuba from more to a stance that he had before he was president, when he was vice president?
Well, I'm not going to give him that much credit yet. He did take a little bit more than a baby step in making it easier for some of the Cuban private sector to get access to our banks and to capital. But what he really needs to do is take them off the state-sponsored list of terrorism, because being on that list makes Cuba ineligible for a whole bunch of things that, quite frankly, could help people on that island live a better life, can help deal with the issue of food insecurity, which is growing as a result of being on that list, increase tourism to the island. I believe it is the right thing for us to do. Our policy toward Cuba is a relic from the Cold War. It's arrogant. It's like we're bullies. We're doing it because we can. That policy is being directed by a small group of right-wingers in this country who, quite frankly, want to go back to the old days when, Batista was the dictator of Cuba and the elite and the rich got everything they wanted and the hell with the poor. So I gave the president some credit on my social media for doing what he did, but it's nowhere near enough.
We could keep it in Central America and talk about the fight that you were having online with the president of El Salvador about moving a mural, but that seems to have resolved itself. You were critical of them moving a mural in an airport, and the president himself of El Salvador says, we moved it, but we moved it to a better location, a nicer location. So,
well, to be truthful, they wanted it removed permanently, and he gets some pushback, and all of a sudden the story got rewritten that he moved it to a different location. The bottom line is the president of El Salvador is the Salvadoran version of Donald Trump, a wannabe dictator who has nothing but contempt for Archbishop Oscar Romero, who, as you know, was assassinated while saying Mass in El Salvador in the early 1980s.
And has been granted sainthood.
And has nothing but contempt.
Yes.
Yeah, who is now Saint Romero. I mean, Romero was, stood for all the things that the current president of El Salvador doesn't. But the idea that he's so thin-skinned that he felt he had to respond and unleash all of his fake bots on me to try to intimidate me. I'm not being intimidated. The bottom line is, if indeed the mural has been put back into the airport, that's fine. But the idea that nobody, including the church, had any clue that he was doing this tells me that what he was trying to do is remove it permanently and hopefully nobody would notice. Well, people noticed. He got called out on it, and he's put it back. But this is a guy that needs to be watched.
This Saturday is the NEPM Asparagus Festival on the Hadley Town Common, and you are going to be there as one of our special guests on the Fabulous 413 stage. We'll be talking to you there, I think, to get you ready for this conversation, Congressman. We'll talk a little bit about the Farm Bill and how you've been working on the Farm Bill, and maybe some of the local folks you've been working on the Farm Bill with, because there'll be a bunch of farmers who'll be right there, and I'm sure they'll be interested in hearing how things are going. But we'll save that conversation for Saturday so that people can come. Meanwhile, there's a little scuttlebutt politically with the Agriculture Committee, where a Democrat from Georgia, Representative David Scott, has some health problems, and he's sort of the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, if I'm not mistaken. And there may be a little bit of a power struggle for who could become the ranking member and maybe eventually the chair of the Agriculture Committee, which will be very important when it comes to the Farm Bill. You would be next in line after Representative Jim Costa. Do you have any interest in no longer being the ranking member of the Rules Committee or the chair of the Rules Committee and becoming the chair of the Agriculture Committee?
Look, I love being on the Agriculture Committee, but being chairman of the Rules Committee, I can do more. If the Farm Bill that comes before the Rules Committee is not to my liking in the Rules Committee, I can adjust it so it is. But on every piece of legislation that goes to the floor, it has to go to the Rules Committee. So in terms of being able to help my district and to help the causes I care about the most, being on the Rules Committee is where I should be. I will stay on the Agriculture Committee no matter what to advocate for the things that I want. But I think if I were the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, I'm not sure how the country would react to that. But I want to maintain my place on the Rules Committee.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about the Farm Bill live on stage on Saturday, and I'll give you another little tip off the question. I don't usually give you the questions in advance of this conversation. I'm going to want to know your favorite asparagus recipes in front of the farmers and the chefs and all the folks that'll be at the Asparagus Festival this Saturday from 10 to 7 in the Hadley Town Common. So be prepared.
I'm looking forward to it, and I do love asparagus, so I always look forward to the festival, and it'll be fun.
U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, the ranking member of the Rules Committee. For now, U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern joins us every week. You can send a question to the congressman through us here, and I'll ask it on your behalf, thefab413@nepm.org. Thanks so much, Congressman.
All the best. Thanks.
You make it sound so scary. Coming up, getting a better perspective of Puerto Rico and chamber music at the same time and right in the center of downtown Holyoke to boot when we explore Puerto Abierto, a concert by the MIFA Victory Players happening this weekend.
But also this weekend is the NEPM Asparagus Festival. So next, we'll visit a farm that's been part of the festivities from day one, Plainville Farm in Hadley.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. But yeah, you can use the roots in cooking.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
The second we get to Plainville Farm in Hadley, Wally Czajkowski puts Khalees to work to start harvesting the cilantro.
Look, I'm for it.
It smells so good. Unless you're one of those people that can't eat cilantro because it smells and tastes like soap.
Right, but like,
feel
I'll
so
eat
bad
your
for those
cilantro.
people.
That's
Yeah.
a birth defect as far as I'm concerned.
We won't hold it against you, but yes, it must be a tough life.
It's a genetic thing.
It is
No,
a
is it
genetic.
really?
It is a genetic thing.
Seriously?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh,
I wouldn't
shit.
necessarily say it's a defect, but it is.
I will. I can say anything I want. It's a defect. Come on, let's get some radishes.
Oh, all right.
I'm sure all you guys like pickled beets, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So one person who always comes up at the Asparagus Festival is Wallace Hibbert, because he's the guy who saved asparagus in the valley.
Yeah.
Well, a young lady went to work for him, and Erna Kornewski, who worked there, made pickled beets and gave them to the young lady. She ate a whole quart, which is easy to do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The next morning, she didn't come to work, and she called in and said, "I'm really sick. I'm bleeding."
It happens to me every time. I should know better by now, but I always think I have a medical emergency.
Exactly.
Wally, 10 years ago, I think it was, I came here to this farm with a video crew from WGBY's Connecting Point for the first ever asparagus festival, and we walked the field. Do you remember that?
It's been that long?
I think so. This is the 10th asparagus.
What?
Yeah.
I can't believe that. It seems like it just started.
I know, right? But how long have you and your family been doing, as you call it, asparagus here
Asparagus.
at Plainville Farm in Hadley?
Oh, 18, 20 years.
That's it.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah.
How long has your family been farming in the area?
Oh, since forever.
Yeah.
Early 1900s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You mentioned Wallace Hibbert, Wally Hibbert, who I was lucky enough to meet in the early days of the Asparagus Festival. Tell us how he saved asparagus for the valley.
When Fusarium moved into the valley, which is a soil-borne disease, the asparagus just started dropping off. And everybody said, screw it. It's not worth the hassle. There's no cure. We're done. Wallace looked and looked, found not resistant, but tolerant varieties, planted them, and they didn't do great, but they did okay. And he kept it going. Plant breeding is amazing. I'm a huge fan of plant breeding. And breeders slowly kept getting asparagus better and better and better. And Wallace just kept encouraging all of us to plant. The only reason we planted is he encouraged us. He says, "I'm gonna be out of here pretty soon. I want more people to take over." That's when I was young. That was a long time. But he was just the nicest guy in the world. Absolutely nicest. A great teacher. He taught everybody.
So what type of asparagus do you grow now then?
When you're talking to Wally, you got to call it asparagus.
Asparagus.
We like Millennium the best. It's been very good to us. Plant breeding, it just does truly get better all the time. You just need an open mind. Why
Plants
not
can
do-
love who they love. Who are we to say?
Exactly.
Plants don't get to choose who they love.
Yeah, Asparagus Festival begins Pride Month. So
Right.
come on, let them breed with whomever they would love. All right, we're walking into the bunching shed
Okay,
here.
I want you guys both to meet Juan Ovali. This is
Hey,
Juan
Juan.
Ovali.
How are you?
One of the backbones of this whole farm.
Nice to meet you.
He's incredibly smart, very talented mechanic, good farmer. His father grows tobacco in the Dominican, and Juan just sent him a tractor. How cool is that?
Wow. How do
Congratulations.
you get a tractor from here to the
He'll
Dominican?
tell you.
And the chip,
On the ship? Yeah.
yeah, chip Dominica. My father take it out there. Now maybe we can grow tobacco this year.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
How long have you been farming here at Plainville Farm in Hadley, Juan?
I have it for 15 years.
15?
Yeah, 15 years.
Yeah.
And where'd you work before that?
Hibe.
See?
Oh, for Wally Hibbert.
Yeah. Wally Hibe.
And Dennis, the guy who just drove in with the truck, he used to work at Hibbert Farm. I worked there for a while. Nothing changes. Oh, and I was talking about Erna. What did you guys call Erna? Big Mama. Yeah,
Big Mama.
She was mama to about 50 people. No joke. Everybody just, mama.
I love that.
Yeah. Oh, she was wonderful. Oh, God.
So do you live here year-round now?
Oh, yeah, I live in Hadley.
He's got his own farm, too.
What are you growing?
I grow squash, tomato, tobacco, cantaloupe, cucumber.
Love it.
He's a natural farmer.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Do you like asparagus?
Oh, yeah.
What's your favorite way to make it, to prepare it?
I would say adobo and bolo oleo.
Uh-huh.
And then you boil it. When you take it out, you don't need to put salt, nothing.
That's a good recipe to try.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I have it on there. You want to try now?
Yep.
You can taste.
Juan is literally giving us his lunch, which is chopped up asparagus with the adobo and olive oil. Yes. Well,
Yeah,
He's a good cook.
I don't doubt it. I haven't had adobo in a while.
Yeah,
Delicious.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
yeah. Take a more.
Okay, I'll
What
have a
do you
little more
taste?
with the
Mary, you want to
adobo.
taste?
It's not spicy.
I know for the spot.
Oh, you did something fun with asparagus. This is what I need to know.
Little adobo and bolo oleo. And then you
good,
boil
man.
it.
Oh, you know what Mary made this year though? Was asparagus hash.
Tell me about Mary Czajkowski. Is your last name Czajkowski?
McNamara.
Mary McNamara. Tell us about your asparagus hash.
It's on website Smitten Kitchen, and it's very easy. I recommend it if you're looking for something different.
Oh, come on. Lesbia's
Great to meet you, Juan. Thank you for sharing your lunch with us.
There's a lot of talented cooks here.
So you got all these crates of asparagus.
Yeah, but the yield is dropping fast now. Uh-huh. It's near the end of the season.
Right. And you only have one person working.
Oh, no, everybody's picking.
They're out there in the field picking right
Oh,
now?
yeah. We pick first, and
Yeah.
then we bunch later.
How many people you got out there picking?
How many people? There's probably 20 picking right now.
I need to know what this contraption with the bicycle wheel is.
Once again, Wallace Hibbard.
Created a bicycle wheel contraption for asparagus?
Tony Tudrin actually made this. That's another name, an old Hadley farm name.
What's his name?
Tony Tudrin. Oh, he died a long time ago. Incredibly ingenious. He was a natural mechanic, like Juan, only Polish. Take a look underneath. Look at. Back then, they didn't buy anything. This was probably made in the Depression.
Wow.
See, that was a wooden wheel from a wagon. Scrap pieces of wood. These are rollers from God knows what.
And it's a giant wooden wheel on top of this contraption made out of scrap wood that turns around and turns and turns, and a bicycle wheel.
We put the bunches here, and this holds the bunch while the blade cuts it.
Ah, so instead of having like a cradle like we saw at Smirowski where you can cut it
Yeah.
with a saw,
Yeah.
this is an asparagus cutting
Cutting table.
It's like a Rube Goldberg machine version of
That's,
I love it.
I,
That's amazing.
I bet when he built this, of course, that would be in the 30s, he probably didn't spend $25. People were very ingenious. That guy made a lot of equipment.
And is this the same motor that he used?
Yeah, look at the size. That's a half horsepower motor. Look at it weighs about 100 pounds. But you can lubricate it. The new motors you can't lubricate.
Right.
No.
You can't fix them all up.
Right,
unless you
right.
got a computer degree.
Exactly. And then the old style belt on it. Here's the thing: if it works, just keep it, right?
Yep. Let's go meet this person over here bunching.
I think you've met Lesbia before.
I think I have too in years
Lesbia
past.
runs the packing barn here.
Hello.
Hello.
What are you working on over here?
I'm working on the asparagus, bunching asparagus, and I do it by myself for in the moment. But after a couple more minutes, everybody gonna be here.
So we just interrupted your peace and quiet, and now more people are going to come and interrupt your peace and
Exactly.
quiet.
Oh, we're ruining it. Right.
How long have you been doing this here in Hadley?
In Hadley, we're doing 15 years.
Do you like to eat asparagus?
Oh yes, we love too many different ways with asparagus. Mostly every day we eat asparagus
What's your favorite way to eat it?
with cheese.
Asparagus with cheese is good.
Cheese, yeah. Everybody likes with cheese, bacon, or put a cheese on it. Or we can do it with boil, just a little peanut butter on the top.
Oh, peanut butter. Wow, we're getting all sorts of awesome recipes here.
It's like you can do ants on a log with it.
Yeah,
I just realized. Thank you so
put
much.
some raisins on there too.
It goes from here into that machine, or like
No, it's already packed. They need to go on in the wood trays over there.
When people like us don't come and bother you at work, how many of these crates do you bunch a day, do you think?
Each person or everybody?
You.
Good question. I can say in the day, probably about 30 boxes.
Wow,
More than
that's a
that.
lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, you should come to the Asparagus Festival on Saturday and come part of the
Wally
bunching
gonna be there.
competition. You could clean the clocks of everybody and bunch the fastest.
But I mean, we might have just broken that. Like, if we bring her in, she's a ringer.
She's a ringer, yeah.
But also, like, you should do it anyway.
Probably. I'm gonna be there.
Well, great to meet you.
Me too. Thank you. Have a good time.
You too.
Coming up, more with Wally Czajkowski of Plainville Farm, where not only will we check in about ongoing labor issues affecting all farms, but you may want to keep your eye on that gauntlet because it's about to get thrown.
And we'll also hear about the works of MIFA's composers and residents that'll be presenting this weekend for their Puerto Abierto concert with music director T.N. Ng.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
All right, the workers are coming in from the field with the newly picked asparagus.
You need some more rubber bands.
She'll take care of you.
That's the one good thing about asparagus season. There's plenty of rubber bands in my house now. How many total acres do you have here at Plainville?
Maybe 250.
That's huge. And you've probably seen Wally's stuff in stores. You can see it at Big Y. It's got a picture of a squash as its logo with a face on it. That's your face, right?
Yeah, it is. It's self-likeness, yes.
Which is funny because you're like the nicest guy, but that squash looks like he's upset.
No, it's not. It's a happy squash.
Wally, we keep calling it asparagus when we talk to you because you call it asparagus. I was convinced that all Hadley asparagus farmers called it asparagus, but even your own family doesn't say it the same way you do.
I don't know why.
Wait, did Wally say it like that?
Wally says it like that, but I know Wally's brother.
Did Hibbert say it like
No.
that?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I actually have old recordings of Wally Hibbert, so I'm going to go through the tapes.
yeah. That's a good idea.
I'm going to go through the tapes and
I can't
see.
believe you save them that long.
Yeah, oh yeah.
What do you grow here on your farm? Oh, we start off with asparagus.
Wally, we were talking to the folks at Czajkowski Farm about labor, and you mentioned that you had about 20 people out in the field harvesting asparagus. Asparagus. How many people total work
There's
here?
30 of us total now.
Talk about the labor issues that you face as a farmer here in Hadley and about the reliance on migrant labor.
Well, there is really no other labor. If you look around here, everybody's from other countries.
Yeah.
There's very few Native Americans working on farms, which isn't surprising. You can get a better job. Well, when I say better, you can get an inside job working on a computer or something, which people think is better than being outside. Personally, I'd rather be outside. But there's really no Americans working on farms anymore. What I see in 20 years is I see the same folks that are working on farms owning most of the farms because they are really good at what they're doing and they have the desire to do it.
We met Juan, who I'm assuming is from the Dominican because his father is still there, but maybe he's not.
No, he is.
Yeah.
And his son is here.
And he's already started his own farm. Do you have other people that have worked on the farm over the years here that have come from other places?
Yeah,
that are
Bartelona's farming. Maybe a third of the people working here have something going that they're growing themselves. And every year they grow a little bit more.
We're constantly hearing about issues at the border. We're constantly hearing about refugees and about how hard it is to get, even, there's a huge Haitian population living off the rotary in Greenfield that are ready and willing to work but are unable to because of the federal processes. Tell me about how you navigate through those issues with the people that are coming to work on your farm, Wally.
It's insanity. There's no other word to describe it. And then the legalization process for a person who came to this country and who wants to become legal and then maybe someday an American citizen, it is so slow, it is so costly, it's ridiculous. Immigration's a big business, it really is. Lawyers make a ton of money off of it, and the government makes money off of it. Plus, a lot of people are paying into Social Security, and they'll never be able to collect it.
Yeah.
So that's what's keeping the system going right now, is all these people paying in and not being able to take anything out. Half of the people working here are H-2A.
And what does that mean?
It means they come over as contract workers for us. They can't work anywhere else. So they're not taking any jobs from Americans. They can only work at Plainville for 7 months, then they're going home again. We get the same people year after year. They're great.
And then they get on a pathway to citizenship eventually? Or what happens?
No. They'll never become citizens. They pay Social Security, they pay income tax, they pay everything, and they get nothing for it. But it's better than being at home and not making money. Everybody here has got families. You got to take care of your family. And a lot of folks take care of their parents. A lot.
Because they may send them a tractor into the Dominican Republic.
A good example.
I don't want to think of the shipping fees for that.
Exactly.
That's
It wasn't
amazing.
that bad. It wasn't that bad.
In Massachusetts, there's been some conversation about the hourly wages of farm workers and the idea that it is still legal to pay a farm worker less than the minimum wage. We've had these conversations
that
before.
is absolute bullshit. There's no other word to say. Nobody pays less. Matter of fact,
Well, so here's the thing. It is legal to do it still, but what your argument has been about why this maybe doesn't need to change as a law is because you believe that no one actually is paying less than the minimum wage.
right. That's what I believe. Because nobody would work for you. Why would you work for somebody paying a ridiculously low amount when you could cross the street and get much better money? So right now, anybody starting here starts at $17.80 an hour. Pretty much everybody takes home $1,000 a week after taxes. But they earn every penny of it, don't get me wrong.
Then the argument would be, well, then what's wrong with passing a law that says that you shouldn't be allowed to do this?
Nobody's against passing that law.
Okay. There were some stipulations that were part of it that made it complicated for some of the folks that wanted to work on Sundays and things like that, right?
Yeah, there are all these side things on that, which is, some of them are stupid, some make sense. And that's the problem. People don't take a simple bill and just say, let's pass this.
Yeah.
They want to add this, they want to add that. And it just takes forever to do something that you could do in 10 minutes.
Right. You were really instrumental at the beginning of the Asparagus Festival that NEPM, formerly WGBY, has been putting on for years. Why do you think this is an important event for our area?
Oh, I think it's really good. It brings attention to a Hadley crop that's been around forever and just gets people thinking about agriculture in the valley, especially in Hadley, which is what I care about.
Is that what you'd say to the people who aren't necessarily fans of the Asparagus Festival being in Hadley?
Oh, that's only a few people who live on the street, and I understand it. It's a royal pain in the ass because you can't even get out of your driveway. I understand that.
Right.
But it's only one day.
And you could walk across the street to the Asparagus Festival and enjoy all the free festivity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Far be it from us to make traffic be terrible on Route 9 in Hadley on one day.
By the way, Route 9 is currently closed between Bay and East.
Wally Czajkowski, Plainville Farm in Hadley, the only person in the valley that I know of that calls asparagus, which I just think is delightful.
I don't even notice the difference when he says that.
Asparagus? Right. Asparagus, 3 syllables. Asparagus.
Who would notice
asparagus.
that? Okay.
Well, we talk about language like every week.
It's the caramel argument.
Caramel.
Caramel versus caramel.
Oh, yeah. Potato. Okay. But Lesbia writes asparagus on the board for sale. She doesn't put the A on the front.
She just called
Aspargo?
it
Just asparagus.
She was calling it aspargo to us. I love that too.
There you go.
Yeah. We ask Smorowski Farm, who are in Hatfield, the Hatfields, as it were, what's the difference? Why does Hadley asparagus get all of the praise on this side of the river? What makes this side of the river's asparagus the best and most prized and most well-known asparagus? Is your Hadley asparagus actually any better than Hatfield asparagus on the other side of the river?
I'm so glad you asked. I wouldn't feed that to a dog. And you can tell Bernie that all day long.
This is going to be an amazing asparagus bunching competition at
go.
the Asparagus Festival.
You know,
on
those
Saturday.
guys came one year, and they're ringers because they have all the practice in the world. And of course they won. Yeah, that's
going to take the trophy home back to
That's what they want. That's what they want. Oh, my. No, our asparagus is grown with love at this side of the river, and you can taste that.
The grass is always greener on the other side.
Thanks to everyone at Plainville Farm for letting us totally get in your way.
Fighting words. Up next, taking a new look at the Caribbean diaspora through a chamber music lens with new works from the MIFA players, composers, and residents with their Puerto Abierto program, which opens tomorrow.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
We're speaking with Tian Ng, who is the musical director and the founder of the musical aspect of the Victory Players, and the MIFA Victory Players are going to have 2 performances of Puerto Abierto this Friday and Saturday. Tian, you are conducting a bunch of orchestras locally. What is it about these MIFA players that is exciting for you? And then we'll get more involved in this particular project you're working on.
The Victory Players are some of the best musicians on their various instruments, and we've kind of brought them in from around the whole country for this express purpose. And it's very special to me because I'm the founding director of the Victory Players. And as a result, I had the pleasure of handpicking each of these virtuosos to bring the team together. And it's really very special. And we've been working together for 5-6 years at this point. And so it's a really, really tight group. And in a real sense, they're kind of family.
Do you also get to handpick the composers that are in residence? And if it's a rotating sort of thing, like you get them for 2 years, correct?
Yeah, so I have them for 2 years. There is a call for scores process. Like, for example, for Puerto Abierto, we opened it 2 years ago. And then they were informed by 2023 and they came for their first residency. And, the opportunity is really twofold. They have a residency where they come and they get to meet the players. They get to see what the possibilities are when there are nearly no limits with the instruments, which is kind of an incredible thing because we have such incredible musicians playing with us. And then, they get the allyship of these wonderful musicians. They discover not just the instruments, but then they have a partner to talk with about the parts that they're writing for.
When you put the call out for Puerto Abierto, what was the call? What was the ask? What were you looking for these composers to be bringing to this particular event?
They knew that they were writing for what we call Piero plus percussion ensemble. So that is flute, clarinet, violoncello, piano, and percussion. They were asked to submit examples of their writing so that I could see that they knew how to work with these instruments. But also, very importantly for us here in Holyoke, I wanted them to engage with the theme. So the first time we did this, it was El Puerto Rico. And I was drawing attention to the original meaning of the name Puerto Rico, which is that it's a rich port. And I wanted to kind of really, move the narrative of what, the Puerto Rican community stands for, means, into one of like, well, this is the place of the oldest continuing traditional classical music in the whole of the USA. So, in fact, it is incredibly rich. And there's no accident why there's so many outstanding musicians that come out. Just think, Bad Bunny, think, Ricky Martin, Jennifer Lopez, all right, all Puerto Rican. And they are imbibing this wonderful exchange of ideas and this rich cultural heritage that comes from many directions, like European, African, Taíno, and of course the broader kind of Latin experience as well. Puerto Abierto was the theme that everybody was asked to respond to. So in addition to demonstrating that they have the technical ability to write for an ensemble like us and to make use of the possibilities of an ensemble like us, I also asked them to respond to this theme of, so how did Puerto Rico get to this place? And it was because it was an open trading port and it had influences from all over. As part of this too, this year we had Carlos Carrillo come and do 9 hours of Puerto Rican music history. We talked about what are some remnants of Taíno musical culture? Why did we only have records starting from the 19th century? And, the situation in which the conservatory was founded, what are some of the musical influences and how it relates to Cuban music? Because, for a lot of people, when you talk about Caribbean music, they think Cuba. But actually what happened in Cuba also happened in Puerto Rico, but also happened in Barbados. They also happened in Haiti. The colonial experience meant that those experiences were somehow divided up between different nationalities, between different languages. And it was an interesting opportunity for us to think about how the Taínos and the Caribs were actually just occupying the whole of the area as one entity, albeit a loose one as far as we understand today.
We're speaking with Tian Ng, who is the musical director and the founder of the musical aspect of the Victory Players. And the MIFA Victory Players are going to have 2 performances of Puerto Abierto this Friday and Saturday.
There's only 4 works in the program. There's also a good mixture of both Puerto Rican and non-Puerto Rican composers in the program, too. What did each of them bring to this topic in their scores?
One of the things I wanted to make sure we do here is that we don't end up ghettoizing yet another community of musicians. So it's like, okay, we're going to talk about Puerto Rico, but we're only going to talk about it with Puerto Ricans who already know about it. And so, amongst the musicians, we're not all Puerto Rican. And so in the first place, that gives us a very rich opportunity to ask the questions that will lead to greater cultural understanding. Like, why do you do it this way? Oh, like, I seem to be doing everything written on the page, but it still sounds wrong. Why does it sound wrong? What's the feel that we're looking for? And then you learn things like, oh, that's because, the rhythm here is the sika from bomba, and, you're not quite getting the feel of this. And then we ask those questions, and then we generate opportunities like, we then had a workshop on bomba drumming. And so Eric Lemon, for example, comes from a very different perspective, right? Now, he has roots in Puerto Rico, but he's ultimately a person who's thinking very much electronically. And to me, there is the touch of EDM and techno in it, which is great, right? Because one of the wonderful things about classical music is that I like the way in which it has interacted with musical cultures and actually had a certain kind of integrity about trying to preserve some of that. And so inviting them to write it is almost like the Iron Chef, where you give them these ingredients and you say, please make something out of it. And they can't help but make something that's truly them. Julia Quiñones comes much more from that kind of academic composition side of things. And so there is definitely that lineage, and it makes sense, because he's a student of Alfonso Fuentes. He was at Puerto Rico Conservatory, and his piece in memory of rivalry is a tribute in a way to that first generation of great Puerto Rican composers that were notated. And so you hear that through line from the past to the present. And so every now and then you feel this intersection between heavy metal, rock, but also kind of academic classical music, which I think is absolutely fascinating. It's just so great.
When we were there watching the rehearsal, I think the coolest thing that I saw, and I know Khalees and I were kind of both like whispering to each other about it, is first of all, there was somebody taking a piano wire in their hands and playing the piano with it on an open piano, and then an ebow, which was, which is an electronic instrument that vibrates a string, and like putting that inside the piano, super cool.
And like the piano ends up being prepared, but like halfway through the piece, like it doesn't start out being prepared.
And, I think, it also shows you that the piano is prepared, meaning that stuff is inserted into the strings and so on. You don't even know it happened, but it starts from the beginning and it ends the same way. And in this piece, the piano is totally normal until the ebows are there. So that's like a kind of brilliant intervention. And there's a certain theatricality of its application. And everybody gets to see it. And I think, if you come and watch the performance, it also generates just a very natural curiosity about like, oh, okay, I just never thought of doing that before. And here's this amazing sound. It just warms the strings up until they just have a glow. And I'm asked to respond to that glow. When you feel the sound bloom, then you move on to the next musical event that happens. And it had to be, so the thing you're talking about is actually a fishing line. We use string rosin on it, so it really grips the piano strings, and it has this wonderful guttural, kind of visceral sound about it. And it's actually part of Eric Lemon's work. And so he has found a very, very clever way of bringing the world of the electronics into this acoustic, unplugged world that we live in.
It's almost like a 60 dB hum at the bottom of like drum and bass. It's super cool. Oh, and then the palm muting that happens on the piano in that piece too, like adding this extra percussive element to this already percussive instrument. It's just very creative. That piece sounds like being outside in a jungle with like buzzing happening in the background. It really feels like weirdly like being in nature, despite all of these kind of unnatural things being done to all of the instruments on stage. It's very it was really cool.
I'll let you in on a secret. There were moments when I was trying to make sense of it before the composer arrived, and the band and I were just kind of playing the piece and feeling it. And then there was this moment where I was like, I think I get it. I think this is like 4 a.m. at EDC in Las Vegas. The party has been going for some time. The sun is rising at 4 a.m. and you're like, oh my God, nature is coming in. And this is that moment of kind of reuniting with the normal world, if you will. And that allowed us just a kind of a visualization and a way to enter what we thought was the composer's headspace.
I always say, if you've been out so late that the birds start to come out, you are been out too late. We're speaking with the music director of the Victory Players, Tien Ng, who will be conducting on Friday and Saturday, Puerto Abierto, the evening celebrating an exchange of ideas in the Caribbean. You mentioned in passing, Tien, that Puerto Rico has the longest track record of consistent classical music in the United States. Can you explain a little bit more about that story?
Well, I mean, it's really the story of colonization, right? Because, they arrived first in the Caribbean and they brought their culture with them. And, one of the early impacts of colonization in the Caribbean was that the Taínos were almost completely wiped out. The consequence of which was that they didn't have the workforce they needed to run the plantations they were hoping to create. And yet at the same time, these places are producing some of the most expensive things. So in the Caribbean, in Saint-Domingue, which was then the capital of Haiti, were several opera houses. And the first opera written in the Americas was right there. There's an opera house in San Juan as well, and Ponce was the cultural kind of capital in that area. We were last week exploring the history of the danza and how people talk about it as a Cuban form, but we know that there's probably a Puerto Rican form, and that it had plenty of time to evolve kind of in parallel, even before it was notated. One of the things that we were thinking about is that these wonderful rhythms that we're hearing, that the roots they have in Yoruba music, and how where they might have been polyrhythms played by different instruments, but they were maybe condensed into one single instrument because that's what they had access to. And we ended up watching an early video of bomba taken in black and white, like in the 30s, 40s. And lo and behold, the bomba drums that they were playing looked much more like the Ghanaian drums that my colleagues work with here at Mount Holyoke with the West African Drum Ensemble. And I just pointed that out. I was like, that doesn't look like the barriles that we're used to in bomba today. And so like you can even see some of these physical aspects of it. It's really a result of that, because where people were, this was before the internet, this was before the radio. So if you wanted to make music, you had to make it. Somebody had to play it, which means that they were creating things, they were playing instruments, they were singing songs, and the different populations were doing different things. The coastal areas in Puerto Rico had a larger African population, and they were playing stuff that is more reminiscent of what we now call bomba. The jibaros in the mountains tended to be more European in origin and descent. And so I feel for us, we are beginning to learn more about this, and the extent to which this history has not been really written, I see us as having a part in that. And it all comes up from this innocent question of being a good neighbor, of like, why does it sound like that? And how do I join you and play some of your music? How do I meet you where you are? And I think that to me is the like kind of larger cultural project what Victory Players is trying to do here in Holyoke.
So this residency started essentially in 2022. In 2023, I'm assuming you put out another residency, or is it just every 2 years? So this year, there will be a new opening for a new project to come to Holyoke and be a part of the MIFA Player.
Yeah, well, so the inspiration of this project really is the Puerto Rican community here in Holyoke, which is like, 44% of the population. And I think the latest census showed even slightly more than that. And if you add the rest of the Latinx or Latina population here, we have a majority Latino population here. In other words, that population is also interacting with the Puerto Rican population. And at the same time, we now have the second and the third generation Puerto Ricans, some of whom have not actually been on the island. So, in some ways, bringing these musicians here and interacting with the students in the elementary schools and in the high school is that first contact for them. Because of that, every year, this time after Memorial Day, we will always be doing 2 weeks of a residency that engages with this culture. And again, in the interest of not ghettoizing any culture and also trying to understand the rich influences on the culture, we started with Puerto Rico and El Puerto Rico for 4 years, actually. And then we moved on to a project called Si Se Puede, which we just released last Sunday on NEPM. And Si Se Puede was working with the Mexican and American intersections. And this year we're back to Puerto Abierto, and it's now starting to become more of a Caribbean thing. So there are 4 pieces this year. There'll be another 3 or 4 pieces next year. And that completes that like album length, 7/8, and it gives everybody enough time to develop and really get to know each other. Then the next project begins, and this time around we're probably going to start with Felipe Sales, who's right here in the Valley at UMass Amherst, and we're going to talk about the intersections of Brazil, which of course, from the perspective of us trying to understand all this music, is very fascinating because they actually moved their court from Lisbon to Brazil. So that meant that there was even more music created because that's where the nobility were. As somebody was pointing out, every time there was a change of regime somewhere on some island or some land, the people who were expelled went to a different place. And sometimes they landed in different places, including Puerto Rico, because it was an open port.
Are there plans to record and release this so that people have more access to it? And you're nodding, so yay!
I'm really proud that NEPM takes all of the Victory Player stuff and puts it on our airwaves here. It really feels like an awesome synergy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we've been taking those things, and then we've been doing a video series out of each of these concerts. So there are interviews with composers and kind of in-depth ones. And lately we've been doing them bilingual, so also they're in Spanish and English. And then we release them as a video series, as a radio show on NEPM. We also release them as a podcast when we can, so that people can listen to them in different ways. And then where possible, I then put everything together and actually release it as an album. So later this year we'll be releasing our El Puerto Rico album.
If people are interested in maybe participating in your residency, where do they look and when do they look?
They should just follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and also on our website is victoryplayers.org. And you should be able to find us quite easily there, and all the calls will be there. And if you're interested in these things, just reach out.
You're hearing a little bit of one of the composer's pieces right now. Is so cool. Tian Ng is the conductor and musical director of the MIFA Victory Players, presenting Puerto Abierto this Friday, May 31st and Saturday, June 1st at Holyoke Media. Find more information and tickets at victoryplayers.org.
A quick note of congratulations to the Northampton High Ultimate Frisbee team. Girls Ultimate Frisbee going to the high school nationals, according to listener Don Cordero and the Daily Hampshire Gazette. 3 weeks ago, the Blue Devils beat Newton North 10-8 to win the Amherst Invitational, the longest annual ultimate tournament in the U.S. The team then faced Newton North again for the state crown this past Sunday, and once again won 9-7. Meanwhile, Northampton boys team player Roan Dunkerley is going semi-pro, which I didn't even know was a thing you could do in
I
ultimate.
didn't know that was a thing you could do.
For the Boston Glory, as well as Team USA in England this summer. Ultimate does have a strong history here in the Valley, and there are those who claim the sport was invented or at the very least popularized here. So one of these days we'll delve deeper into the Frisbee.
I am so bad at them. Frisbees, by definition, they are not deep. Friday on the Fabulous 413, tasty treats from one of the coolest food trucks around, Thai Chili Food Truck, who you'll be able to sample this weekend at the NEPM Asparagus Festival.
A Valley music scene staple joins us for Live Music Friday when Winter Pills drop by just before their very nearly sold-out show at the newly reopened Iron Horse.
We have on good authority that at last count, there are only 7 tickets left, y'all. We'll take a trip over the mountain to the Thunderdome with the folks at Tip Top Wine Shop in East Hampton.
And since we're about to eat an alarming amount of asparagus, we'll find out about some of the science that only asparagus can do to your body in the bathroom with epidemiologist Dr. Andrew Lover from UMass.
See you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.